Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers is a weekly program designed to answer all your questions, including the ones you didn't even know you had, and to clarify the endless debates around the wonderful and fascinating world of sexuality. Join us for real talk about sex from two experts in the field. Richard and Larry Siegel have over 50 years of experience as sex therapists, educators, counselors, and researchers. The Siegel brothers are recognized around the world as trainers of medical and mental health professionals.
Good evening and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. My name is Ricky Siegel and I'm a certified sex therapist and supervisor.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And still my awesome big brother.
Still my favorite role.
Thank you for joining us. We're coming to you live on the internet. If you're on Facebook, I hope you followed the link over to YouTube and are watching us now. We're also archived. If you missed the show, you can watch this later or any of our past shows.
And please subscribe to our YouTube channel and share it around. Help us get those numbers up. It's a new thing for us, so it's help us out in terms of growing in this new way.
We've recently cut the cord from terrestrial radio.
Yep.
And tasting some freedom.
Yes,
doing
indeed.
our own thing, but trying to find more time for sex talk. Of course, as we say, every day is time for sex talk, but this is our time.
That's
Fridays at 7 p.m. East Coast time, and we are grateful to have you with us.
Yes, so thank you for joining us. And let's start with our favorite way to start and have a little glance at sex in the news. So what do we have for our first story tonight?
Well, of course, COVID-19 pandemic continues to dominate every aspect of our lives. And of course, it's no surprise that it's had a profound effect on people's sexuality and relationships. And there is an item in the news this week looking at sex differences in how COVID affects men and women differently, which we thought was pretty fascinating and wanted to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, and one of the things that we seem to be seeing, and this is around the world, in this one particular study, I think it was a total of 18 countries. And what we seem to be seeing is that women in many places are getting infected more than men, but it seems to hit men more severely. Men are dying at almost twice the rate that women are. And they're kind of looking for a number of different reasons to explain that phenomenon.
I think the first part is less mysterious than the second. It makes sense why more women would be infected than men, because women tend to be more often caretakers and taking care of sick family members or working in healthcare as nurses or physician's assistants or physicians. Many women are physicians today. So it seems that women would be more at risk just in general of being exposed.
And not just in healthcare and those kinds of settings too, but there's also that kind of gendered partition in the entire service industry.
True.
Right? That is mostly made up of women.
Most of our frontline essential workers are women.
Yep.
But it's a physiological thing.
Yes, there's the not so obvious part.
The virus affects men's bodies apparently differently, or men's immune systems are not as strong as women's.
Right. Well, they do kind of work differently, and it has to do with phases of immune responses, especially when a virus first enters. So let's just, for right now, we can call it a sort of multitude of factors that involve different innate immunity between men and women. Women seem to have more of that innate immune response. There are hormonal factors. There are certainly genetic factors. You know, not having a Y chromosome really is something of a benefit, especially when it comes to a lot of these things. We can't really claim to fully understand this phenomenon, but it is an interesting one. And I think the more we watch it and the more we learn about it, the more we might be able to understand other health issues that do seem to affect men and women a little bit differently. So it's the beginning of hopefully understanding the human body in a way that we hadn't before. But it is an interesting phenomenon that we see that men and women are differentially affected by this.
And interesting to note, these researchers, this is from an article in the British medical journal, The Lancet, It says the same pattern was observed with Ebola.
Ebola, yep.
Very interesting.
Yep.
So I'm sure more will be revealed on that.
Yes, absolutely. Right.
Second item, a little happier news.
Yeah, it's one that, it just kind of, no pun intended, tickles me a little. And I just like to be able to say this and
Wait till
talk
we
about
finish
this.
shooting the show before you go tickle yourself, please.
Okay.
But yes, in the news is this, again, a mention that masturbation is the safest sex.
That's right.
Especially for single dating people who are not in committed relationships. Mm-hmm. You are your safest partner.
That's right. And New York City and New York State actually has published this real thorough graphic guidebook about managing coronavirus, and that is one of the big sections in it that's probably getting all the attention. It certainly caught my eye. That again, self-pleasuring, masturbation, you are your safest sex partner. But they also kind of give degrees. They also say the next best level of protection is making sure that you're having sex with people that you are sheltering in with, that you are living with. Right. Now, if this is a family situation, if you're living with your family, no, we're not talking about that. That's a whole different show topic. But I thought it was very interesting, and one of my favorite parts about that whole thing was reading other newspaper articles from India, from Iran, from Hong Kong. It seems the rest of the world is really kind of enamored with this idea as well. And the fact that New York is publishing a guidebook telling people that the best sexual response to COVID is masturbation. So I don't think we've ever seen this sort of global conversation around masturbation that wasn't, this kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, it's time. This whole, we've talked about it on other shows, and we won't waste time on tonight's show. We'll have to bring it back up again. But this porn panic that we're living with now is just because we're still too immature and uncomfortable talking about masturbation.
Well, sure.
That's the issue. So it's easier to blame porn for all our problems and not have to talk about masturbation.
Well, look at the phrase that is most commonly used. We're talking about people who look at porn. And I challenge anybody to find me one person that just looks at porn.
No, I did find one.
You did?
Yes. Usually I would laugh at that and go, oh, both hands on the keyboard, are they? But I did meet a young man. I couldn't imagine how this was possible, but he told me that he discovered porn at 16 and masturbated to ejaculation for the first time at 21. I asked if he carried his fellas around in a wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
How did he go 5 years literally looking at porn? It's the only one in my entire career. Otherwise, it's as goofy as a phrase as sleeping together.
Sure.
To describe intercourse.
Sure.
And all these guys, all these college students that have come to us in a panic, I think I must be an addict because I masturbate every day. If you ask them, if you were having sex every day, would you be standing here in a panic telling me you need therapy? They say, no, I wish I was having sex every day. I said,
here you go. Right. But here is the disconnect.
Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I like to tell these guys, your penis doesn't know if there's anybody else in the room with you.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So yes, pluses for the health benefits of masturbation, and we'll probably return to that topic in the future.
Indeed. So I'm just gratified to see that people are giving masturbation a hand.
Ah, bravo.
I'm Rachel Needle, co-director of Modern Sex Therapy Institutes. And Modern Sex Therapy Institutes is a continuing education provider. We provide continuing education for medical and mental health professionals around the world. And we have over 140 archived workshops on our website, so please check them out at www.modernsextherapyinstitutes.com. Also, we have a number of certification programs, including sex therapy, couples and sex therapy, LGBTQIA affirmative therapy, alternative relationships, transgender mental health care, medical sexology, sex education, and sex counselor certifications. In addition, we offer a PhD in clinical sexology. So please, again, go to our website, check out everything that we have to offer. A lot of our stuff is available solely online from the convenience of your own home or office. We do things live in 8 states and live via webinar as well.
We are really honored and thrilled to have a terrific guest on tonight's show, a true pioneer
Yes,
in
really.
both the gay civil rights movement and working with transgender folks.
And that word pioneer is most often, I think, misused, but it's very apt here.
Yes, we will be talking after our break with Dr. Margie Nichols, an expert on transgender mental health care and LGBTQ plus affirmative therapy.
Yes, indeed.
As our previous guest, Joe Court, discussed a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So I look forward to speaking with Margie.
Hello, we are back, and it is indeed our pleasure to have as our guest this evening a giant in the field, a legend, Dr.
Yes.
Margie Nichols, transgender mental health specialist and creator of the Institute for Personal Growth in Northern New Jersey, now in 3 locations. But I really am not being hyperbolic. I would love to start off with having you tell our listeners a little bit about the incredibly important history that you were a part of.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. I mean, thank you very much for those lovely words. Some of them translate to old. I mean, I've been around a long time. I'm an early baby boomer. I was born in the late 40s. I've been around a long time because I was really good at school, wound up completely out of my element at Radcliffe. But then I did the whole 60s. Like I think I have the honor of being the first person kicked out of Radcliffe for intravenous drug use. Yeah. I did the whole 60s thing.
And what I know about Radcliffe, that's an achievement.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely right. Yeah. By the late 60s, I was, that's how my entree into the therapy field was actually as an ex-addict peer counselor. Some people may remember back in the days of therapeutic communities. That was, I went through a kind of a therapeutic community and then worked in one and then went to graduate school. But meanwhile, I mean, in some ways I'm a cliche of my generation. I was involved in the civil rights movements in the 60s, in the anti-war movement, early in the feminist movement, explored, tried to be as open as I could be about my sexuality, although that was harder, and came out as a lesbian in 1975. I was in graduate school at the time. Now, this was 2 years after homosexuality had been removed from the DSM. Especially people in the mental health field, to get a sense of what the history is. It wasn't that long ago. We're talking 50 years ago, not that long ago, less than 50 years ago. You could not be openly gay and be a mental health professional because you were mentally ill. Right. You suffered from a mental illness. So, but in 73 that changed. I came out, I was for a long time one of those people who was like, hi, I'm Margie Nichols, I'm gay. You got something to say about that? Very kind of militant, edgy, involved in the lesbian feminist movement. In 1976, I helped with a group of other feminist women in Central Jersey. I helped form the first federally funded battered women's shelter in the country in Keyport, New Jersey, if you can believe it. And but we didn't just have a battered women's shelter. We offered a lot of other women's services. And one of the things that we offered was a peer support group for lesbians. Run by lesbians for lesbians. And I can't begin to tell you in 1976 what that was That was completely unheard of. But the women that came to that group, it was like such a lifeline. Do you know what I mean? I mean, because these were women who'd grown up in a generation where many of them had been forcibly committed to mental institutions, that abandoned by their families. I mean, really, really tough hardship. Lots of violence, anti-gay violence, anti-lesbian violence. And it was so wonderful to be able to provide that experience. I knew instantly My internship was in child and family therapy, but I knew instantly I didn't want to do child and family. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with gay and lesbian people. And that's what I did. I tell people I didn't want to go into private practice because back then, 1981, there's a whole big community psychology movement going, and private practice were like, they were like the,
Called analysts in Manhattan, right?
yeah, exactly. The analysts who were, up on Park Avenue, all they cared about was money. But so I didn't want to do private practice, but I did want to work with gay people. And I called all of these community mental health centers all over New Jersey, and they all told me that they didn't have enough gay or lesbian clients to warrant hiring one staff member to work with that clientele. Do you believe that? 1981, right? So I started my own private practice. By 83, this was the beginnings really of the gay affirmative therapy movement. I mean, I didn't know it at the time. It didn't have that name at the time, but I was one of that cohort that was doing gay affirmative therapy. And it was a lifeline and a godsend for people at that point.
Was there any training available, any mentors, or were you flying by the seat of your pants?
Well, I was flying by the seat of my pants, but I managed to, many of us connected with each other. I was in the New York area. My closest colleague and mentor for many years was a gay man named Michael Chernoff, who went on to write a bunch of books about AIDS and barebacking and, eroticizing same sex. And anyway, but yeah, we were all flying by the seat of our pants. I mean, there were a couple of, Betty Berzon wrote a book, Positively Gay, in the 70s. Vivian Cass came out with her whole developmental identity theory about gay identity and development. I think that was actually the late 70s or early 80s, but some of it was obvious, and some of the concepts now translate to transgender affirmative psychotherapy, right? I mean, it's the same kind, some of the same concepts for all sex and gender minorities. Like one is the concept of minority stress and internalized societal stigma, right? That, that many people back then, people had grown up never hearing a whisper of the idea that it was okay to be gay. And all that, I mean, all you ever heard was perverts, creepy men on street corners, molesting little boys, that kind of thing. And so people had really internalized those attitudes. And so it sort of became obvious rather quickly that one of the therapeutic issues was to help people deal with their internalized homophobia and to help them recognize that what they were feeling wasn't about them as people. Right. It was about social attitudes, right? And it was about societal oppression. And
sadly, 50, 60 years later, that attitude still hasn't changed, that people want to look at like suicide rates as evidence that have mental illness instead of recognizing that it's society and homophobia that causes
exactly. When enough people say they hate you, kind of self-loathing becomes a natural evolution.
Natural, right? There really was hardly anybody who was doing sex therapy with lesbians and gay men. So that, that was became a sort of a specialization. And then from 85 to 88, I started and became the first director of New Jersey's AIDS social service program, Hyacinth Foundation. It's still around, but that was, we had to do that, right? That's what lesbians did actually in the 80s. Was the big rapprochement. Before that, lesbians and gay men had been really pretty separate.
Right.
Politically, socially, didn't like each other much. But then when AIDS hit, lesbians just stepped up, and a lot of gay men appreciated it incredibly. And that was the rapprochement between gay men and lesbians.
50, 60 years into that civil rights movement, it seems like history's come back around again, and we seem to be at the very beginning of society accepting trans folks. And
Yes, I would agree.
into that
Absolutely.
world.
Right.
But let me just give you a plug, since it's not out yet, but coming out in the fall. We want all of our therapists, listeners especially, to wait for the Modern Clinician's Guide to LGBTQ plus clients, the Inclusive Therapist. Beautiful title. Can't wait to read it.
Mm-hmm.
And I might add that
Yes.
Dr. Nichols
Thank you. Yeah.
a major chapter to the book that we had the pleasure of editing, The Art of Sex Therapy Supervision. Margie did a chapter on sex therapy with transgender and gender nonconforming patients.
Transgender activism really started in the 90s. And not surprisingly, one of the early issues that transgender activists took up was this issue of being pathologized.
Of course.
Right? Which led to changes in DSM-5 and the big changes in the standards of care for treatment of transgender and gender nonconforming people. The big change is basically, hey, you know what, guess what? There's nothing weird or abnormal or sick about being gender diverse. Just, there isn't. Most people still have to catch up with that. But you know why, I think? Because transgender issues, and especially the whole non-binary thing, right? I mean, you tell people, hey, guess what? Gender isn't just men and women. It's not just male and female. That's just like, you see people's heads explode.
Right.
That it's just, they can't wrap their head around that. And because you wonder why the reactions are so out of proportion to reality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this whole transgender predators in the bathroom. Like, how many transgender people do you think come into your bathroom in a year? You know what I mean? At your little truck stop in South Carolina.
People equate transgender people with sexual deviants and predators and offenders, and think that a guy's going to put on a dress so he can hang around a woman's room and molest little girls. Meanwhile, transgender people are the most at risk for violence.
That's right.
In public places, especially
Absolutely.
Bathrooms. And how in the world is anybody going to check? We're going to need genital inspectors outside of public bathrooms to check driver's licenses or birth certificates.
I think Mike Huckabee wants to do that.
Yeah.
Madness.
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
And I think there really is this relationship. Right? It's one of these beautiful sort of inverse relationships with really, I think the greater that reaction, the greater that negativity, the more they are uncomfortable, not only with themselves, but with just the whole idea. And I find that especially around, whether it's the bathroom thing or just the pathologizing of transgender people, that the less they understand, the more resistant they are.
Absolutely.
And that's what I think, that's really what that connecting point is. Yeah, it's fear.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the culture at large, but within our own field, there's still, number one, incredible ignorance, which is why, Rachel and Arlene Lev and I are putting together a certification program in transgender mental health, doing mental health counseling with transgender and gender non-binary people, because there's an incredible, the standards of care just changed in 2011, and the DSM-5 came out, 12, 13? Yeah, right, exactly. So, almost everybody was taught something wrong in graduate schools. So nobody's got good training on this. So some of it's that, and some of it is mental health professionals are threatened too. Mental health professionals are threatened by it too. We're people like everybody else.
That's right.
That's I complain about that too often. We're people like everyone else, but the mental health field should not mirror the society at large.
I agree. No, it's our job. It's
our job, right? Like, my favorite, my go-to guilt line is couples counselors that don't talk about sex are like plumbers that don't do toilets. right? And
Right.
their therapists go, ooh, I don't do the gays. It's out of my wheelhouse. I've never been trained. Yeah, go get trained or
Right.
get out of the field.
Right. Well,
Right.
that's been a catch-all excuse to avoid a lot of this stuff. We saw the same thing with medical doctors treating patients with HIV. Oh, no, that's not what I'm going to do. You should go to somebody who's
Right.
really trained in that. And there's that,
Right.
one person in an entire geographic region.
Right. I mean, it's only been around since, right? The first case in 1981. Who's trained in it? Yeah.
Yeah, but I think anytime we're changing the status quo, there's going to be the reaction. And by changing that foundation of what people have always thought they knew about gender, that it is that binary, that it is that either or proposition, I think I think we can't be surprised that people are in a tizzy about it.
Visually, when you look at somebody new that you've never seen before, one of the first things you do unconsciously is read their gender. It's so big in that for us to categorize, which box.
Sure.
It's
And then the reaction.
People when they can't put somebody in the box. Yeah.
They get nervous.
Or how dare you defy my expectation?
That's a big part too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you mentioned the third plug I wanted to make sure we got in, the certification track, which we're so proud of.
Yeah.
Sex Therapy Institutes. We couldn't possibly have partnered with a bigger giant in training therapists in transgender mental health and working with transgender patients should they need our services.
Thanks. But I want to give a plug to Arlene, because Arlene was actually, in terms of specializing, she was there before I was. She wrote the book in 2003. She wrote the book called Transgender Emergence, which is written for mental health, and it was a totally non-pathologizing point of view. She's been involved in crafting the standards of care. So, between her and me, I have a lot more on the sex therapy side and a kind of a range of clinical experience between her and me, and the people that we've pulled in to do these seminars, really top notch. I think.
Yes.
I think
to all of our.
I wish that when I had been starting out, I had the course that we're designing now.
Arlene and Margie.
There's a lot of issues, right?
Put together some of the best names in the business, a real all-star.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to check out modernsextherapyinstitutes.com to find out about that training.
This might be a time that the transgender and gender non-binary people might reach out to you. One of the things that's been impacted because of COVID is healthcare, right? And a lot of transgender people have medical needs that, for hormones and surgeries and so on and so forth. And this has made it very difficult for a lot of people. And so that's an additional stress. People who have been waiting, 2 years for a surgery and it's now canceled because it's an elective procedure, people who want to start hormones and they can't because there's no providers available right now. So, just keep in mind that you might get more clients like that because this is a pretty stressful time.
We're so grateful.
Hey.
Thank you so much. So great to see you
in our lives. Again, Dr. Margie Nichols, the founder and former director of the Institute for Personal Growth in Jersey City, Highland Park, and Freeport, New Jersey. Freehold.
Perfect. Okay.
Be well, Margie.
Thanks
so much.
Bye.
Well, again, our thanks to Dr. Nichols. Just a powerful lady and incredible work that she's doing. And of course, I have to brag, we couldn't be more proud at Modern Sex Therapy Institutes to be partnering with Dr. Nichols on the transgender mental health certification track.
Mm-hmm.
And as we said during the interview, any of our therapists and sexologist listeners and followers would be wise to check out the amazing training opportunities available to know more about these folks who will very likely be coming to us for help, for advice.
And I want to repeat that too. Dr. Nichols was saying, if you are a therapist, a psychotherapist, a marriage and family therapist, a clinical social worker, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, however you identify professionally, you have to know this stuff. This is not a specialty anymore. This is a part of people's lives. And it's not a question of if you ever get a client or a patient with transgender issues or any type of gender identity issues. It's a when and how often you get them. So we can't afford this anymore. This is part of that nonsense that kind of has to stop. People putting things off because they're too uncomfortable either understanding them or dealing with them. And the excuse of giving them to a specialist because it's in the patient's best interest, we have to stop that. No, you are the professional. Correct. You need to be able to deal with this. This is a human issue.
And gays and lesbians and trans folks have been nothing but pathologized by the counseling and medical professions for forever.
Exactly.
And it's time it stops.
Exactly.
Right?
So these are not these types of people. These are people. And please approach them as such.
So that'll do it for us for this week.
Yep,
right?
It's another one in the tank, as they say.
So that's Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers, and we hope you will join us next Friday and every Friday at 7 p.m. on the East Coast, wherever you happen to be. Adjust accordingly, or follow us on YouTube.
Yes, indeed. And thank you for watching, and please stay safe.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.